I think when I think about the future of general practice, I think of 3 words. I think it's going to be a lot bigger, I think it's going to be a lot broader, and it's going to be a lot brighter. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about each of these things and what I mean and how it might impact your training, and more importantly, what happens after training, your careers as GPs. So it's going to be a lot bigger. For example, you might have seen very recently that the Royal College has called for there to be 5,000 GP trainees each intake, each year, rather than at the moment we have about 3,500 starting each year. And that's because we're so short of GPs in the UK. We're about 10,000 GPs short. Okay, so that's Helen Stokes-Lampard, the chair of the Royal College, and at the same time as us needing more GP trainees, so that there's more GPs at the other end, what we've seen over the last 15 years, so 2004, when the new contract came in, is when I started my GP training, actually. And from then, so 15 years later, the average number of patients per practice has increased 50%. But we've actually lost numbers of whole-time equivalent GPs in that same 15-year period, not increased. So we've got less doctors looking after a lot. This is why we need you guys to get through training, get your CCT and come and help us, but also why we need to take more. And we've also seen at the same time, average practice list bigger, but also practices getting bigger. So when I was training, it was quite common to have single-handed GPs, or a lot of practice had just 2 or 3 partners, 2 or 3 doctors. That's very uncommon. So like my practice, we've only got 2 doctors. We're actually a dying breed. The average number of partners has got bigger now, 5, 6, 7 partners in each practice, or doctors in each practice. And if you look, the largest GP practice now, it's one of these super practices, 400,000 patients. That's a huge thing. We're seeing a lot more practices working together in federations or in primary care networks, okay? And so, it's gonna get bigger and bigger, all right? It's gonna get a lot broader. So what do I mean by that? So the first thing is primary care networks. Not only is it making the group that's working together bigger, so a primary care network is where a group of practices are working together, but often not just GP practices. You'll also have community health providers, you might have practice or community pharmacists, you might have sort of allied health professionals, so care navigators, things like that, where there'll be a minimum of 30,000 patients that each primary care network is going to be looking after, and most are actually about 40 to 50,000, rather than your average practice with 5,000, 6,000 patients. So what you're seeing is bigger and bigger groups. But when I say broader, not just that there's more practices working together, but that there's allied health professionals, so care navigators, physician associates, advanced practice nurses, nurse practitioners, paramedic practitioners. So sometimes you see some practices, they've got a whole team of other people to help support us look after our patients. So, for example, there's some practices where the doctors hardly do any visits. Almost all of the visits are done by a paramedic practitioner that they might have hired. Or that a lot of the medication reviews that I'm sure that you're all doing in practice, those are handled by a practice pharmacist, and then you might only have to review some really complex ones. So it frees up your work to actually deal with, complex patients. Sometimes in some practices, if someone's got, what sounds like on triage a self-limiting illness, one of the nurse practitioners will often see them. Again, it can free you up to see those things that are a little bit more complex, okay? And we're also seeing broader in that there's technology now coming in, so that there's a broader range of ways to interact with patients. So, we're looking at artificial intelligence. How many people have heard of GP at Hand? So GP at Hand is a NHS arm of Babylon, which is a private provider. They have a practice based in London that has taken on patients from all over the country, okay? They've now opened up in Birmingham as well, all right? So look, they've got at least 1,000 patients from nearly every London commissioning group in this one tiny little practice in East London, okay? We've got other providers offering online services, so that we're now seeing the opportunity for patients to be seen through an app or video consulting, or even for queries that aren't acute, where it's just a query that could be answered, using email services and things like that. So your job is going to become broader. It's going to become that digital isn't going to be something that an innovative practice does. By the time you guys finish training, digital will be the norm. Every practice, by the time you finish training, should be offering access to online consultation. That's part of the long-term plan, okay? That's part of what the additional funding is for. And then there's also going to be a range of places and ways to see patients. So for example, Livy's, a startup, they're offering video consultations via Boots pharmacies, okay? Boots themselves own a couple of practices. Virgin have recently opened up practices all over the place, okay? And they're buying up practices. And then we're also seeing private GP services, which when I first did GP training, it was very few. There were one or two in Harley Street in London, and then there were a couple of travel clinics, but there were very few true private GP services. But now there's lots of them. So there's Dr. Now, which Dr. Arif works for. There's our practice, which is about 5 minutes from here, private GP care. There's Babylon, Push Doctor, Doctor Care Anywhere. So again, you know, it's going to become the norm, I think, in your working career, that there's a range of providers and a range of options, all right? What that means is there's more choice in how you want to work and options for you to sort of take jobs in. And then it's broader in that the scope of what a GP might do in their working career, you know, 30 years ago, the options were you qualified, you got a partnership and you stayed there till you retired, or you got a salary job until eventually you got made a partner, or you locumed for a while until you took one of those long-term jobs. Now some people choose to locum their whole career as an option, as a choice, okay? It's not something you do until you find a proper job. It is a career choice. And increasingly, portfolio careers are really popular. You know, we teach a CCT Plus course for doctors that are finishing training, and over the last decade I've been teaching that course, more and more people say they're interested in doing multiple roles, okay? And later, Dr. Arif will be talking about her portfolio career, but you know, increasingly the Royal College, Health Education England, the Department of Health are recognizing that offering people choice to do multiple things is one of the ways that they stay stimulated intellectually, that sometimes doing face-to-face general practice, which is very intensive, that doing that for 8 or 9 sessions, actually for a lot of people, that's a recipe for stress and burnout and things like that. Whereas doctors that do that maybe 5, 6 sessions, but then have a day or half a day where they're doing something different, it keeps them stimulated, it keeps them interested, and they're able to be part of the workforce longer. So they're actually recognizing and piloting, offering people these things, both to help recruitment, but also to help retention, okay? And then finally, I think general practice is going to be brighter, okay? Why is it going to be brighter? Well, for a long time, there's been huge underfunding of general practice. We'd fallen way behind. 90% of healthcare contacts happen in general practice, but we were getting less than 8% of the funding of the NHS. And that's because general practice is phenomenally efficient, because each practice is its own little business. And when you're running your own little business, you care about how that money's spent, and because that business isn't just a traditional business which is about making profit. Don't get me wrong, each partner wants to make sure their business is viable. They don't want to get bankrupt and shut down their practice. But you see, they're in the business of healthcare, of looking after patients. So not only do I want to make my practice efficient, if I could do something that might make more profit but gets in the way of me doing my job looking after my patients, I don't want to do that. Do you see? So it's different to just a traditional business. And so what you find is general practice is the most efficient, cost-efficient part of the health service. So GP practices often, for example, won't waste money advertising in BMJ careers if they can find a good candidate through word of mouth or networking. That where possible, they will make efficient use of the funds they've got, because it means that they can use the rest to provide adequate facilities for their patients and leave some for profit. Whereas you'll see sometimes in the NHS, there's a lot of waste, you know, in the hospitals, for example, okay? So one of the things that recently happened is this 5-year deal for general practice, that there's going to be an increase in funding. Look at the real terms spending. So look, there was a big decline, and then slowly it's going up, and over the next few years it's projected that it's going to be, that we're going to get a greater proportion of NHS funding coming through to general practice. So this is good because it's going to kick in by the time you guys finish your training, okay? Because it's actually been quite dark days for general practice. You might have seen in the last decade, there's been practices closing down, people struggling to recruit doctors, but finally more funding's coming in, Actually, for years, the average income of salaried GPs and GP partners was dropping for years. And that's because a lot of people politically felt that the new contract that came into being in 2004 was too generous to GPs, and they're trying to claw it back with more work and less. But actually, the last 3 years, it started to go in the right direction again. And if we look, this is the latest state of tax data we have. Now the averaged income for both partners and salarieds combined was 94,800. That was up 2,000 on the year before, which was up a couple of thousand on the year. So it's going in the right direction. So again, by the time you finish training, I would hope this is pushed up a little bit further, okay? And then the difference between contractor and salary, contractors are partners. So, they have more responsibility, they're working usually longer hours, and so they get potentially better earnings as a result. Salaried GPs, that figure might seem really low. Some of you might be thinking that's less than I make now, if you're an ST3, for example, okay? And you've got a couple of years experience. But salaried GPs, this isn't for full time. The majority of salaried GPs work less than full time. So this is average income, but it includes some people who are only working 2 days a week, for example. Do you see? It includes some people who are working 6 days and some who are working full time. So it's a range of all of those. And at the same time, I think some of these things are filtering through, and we're actually managing. For years, they couldn't hit the target of recruiting doctors into general practice. They wouldn't fill the numbers. But this year, they actually hit their target and exceeded it after the first round 1 re-advert. And now round 2 is going on right now. They're actually going to be above it significantly. It's the first time it's happened for about 10 years. We've been teaching GP entry for 14, 15 years. And almost every year they fall short. But this year is the first year for a long time they've hit us. I think some of those things have filtered through, not just in England, but also in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales. All of the 4 home nations have exceeded their targets for recruitment. And, I met a lot of you through some of that journey, and it's great to see you in it now. But, you're part of that, sending the message of what GP training and GPs like to the next generation and people that come after you. Just to summarize, I think that the future of GP is going to be bigger practices, okay? One of the reasons for that is people working together with other practices and with other healthcare professionals, but also the population's growing, and we've got an aged population with multiple, complex needs. People are living longer. It's going to be broader. So you're going to be working with a range of healthcare professionals. You'll have a range of career options. You'll have the opportunity to develop a portfolio career tailored towards what you want, and it's going to be brighter. There's more funding coming to GP. We've had some times where it's been really difficult, but finally I think things will start improving with recruitment. So if there's more of us to share the workload, each of us will find our workload is more manageable, and that will help with well-being, which we're going to talk about later. But at the heart of general practice are people. It's individual connections between you and your patient, you and your team members. And what makes me really excited about the future of general practice, and why I think it's going to be so bright, is that the future of general practice is sitting in front of me. And you are the future of general practice. And I know that with the efforts that you make once you get through training, that you're going to do this job to the best of your ability, that you have grown up as digital natives, and that you're going to be able to harness that skills and that knowledge and that enthusiasm to the best ability of your patients. And that's what makes me so happy about the future of general practice, that when I'm going to need care in 10 years, I'm so happy that you're the doctors that will be looking after me. Thank you so much. That's the future of general practice.